At a family dinner surrounded by candlelight and expensive wine, he looked at his wife and called her poor, plain, and worthless. He threw divorce papers in her face, told her she should be grateful anyone married her at all. His mistress sat across the table smiling. His parents nodded along like he'd said something wise. And every single person in that room expected her to cry, to beg, to fall apart, and disappear quietly into the night. What none of them knew, what not a single soul at that table could have imagined, was that the woman they just humiliated owned 68% of the family company. She'd been buying it piece by piece for 10 months, using shell companies and her maiden name while they laughed at her, while they dismissed her, while they treated her like she was invisible. And in 7 days she would walk into a boardroom, sit at the head of the table, and take everything they thought belonged to them. This is the story of how a quiet wife became the most powerful woman her husband never saw coming. Have you ever been in a room full of people and felt completely invisible? Like nothing you said mattered? Like the people who were supposed to love you were the ones tearing you apart? If you have, then you already understand what this woman was feeling. But what you don't understand yet, what nobody understood, is what she did about it. Before we dive into this, do me a quick favor. Hit that subscribe button right now. It takes 1 second. And drop a comment telling me, if someone humiliated you in front of a room full of people, would you fight back immediately, or would you wait and plan your response? I genuinely want to know, because what this woman chose to do will surprise you. All right, let's get into it. The candles were already lit when Mira Valdez walked into the Greystone dining hall. Twin rows of amber flame danced along the center of a long mahogany table, casting everything in a warm glow that should have felt welcoming. It didn't. The room smelled of rosemary and roasted lamb, of expensive wine poured too freely, and of something else, something bitter that lived beneath the polished surfaces of this family. Mira had learned to recognize that smell. It was contempt. Every chair was occupied except one, the seat farthest from the head of the table, the seat closest to the kitchen door, the seat nobody wanted, her seat. She smoothed the front of her olive green dress, the one she'd bought at a second-hand shop 3 years ago, and tailored herself, and walked toward it without a word. Her fingers brushed the thin gold bracelet on her wrist, her grandmother Rosa's bracelet, the only jewelry she ever wore. She sat down, folded her hands in her lap, and waited. Dante Greystone didn't look up when she entered. He was too busy laughing at something Celeste Moreau had whispered in his ear, his hand resting casually on the back of her chair like she belonged there. And maybe, in his mind, she did. Celeste wore red tonight, a silk dress that clung to her like a declaration. Her dark hair fell in waves over one shoulder, and her lips curled into a quiet, triumphant smile every time she caught Mira looking. Dante's father, Leonard, occupied the head of the table with the rigid posture of a man who believed the world owed him something. Silver hair slicked back, jaw set like stone, eyes scanning the room like a general surveying troops he didn't quite trust. He acknowledged Mira's arrival with a single dismissive glance, the kind of look you give a stain on an otherwise perfect tablecloth. Vivian Greystone, Dante's mother, didn't even offer that much. She adjusted the diamond pendant at her throat, turned her whole body toward Celeste, and said, "You look absolutely radiant tonight, darling. Pregnancy suits you." Celeste beamed. She placed one manicured hand delicately over her midsection, cradling air. "Thank you, Vivian. The first trimester has been exhausting, but Dante has been so supportive." She reached across the table and squeezed Dante's hand. He squeezed back, looking at her like she was the most precious thing in the room. Mira watched the exchange. Her stomach clenched, but her face remained still. She reached for her water glass and took a slow, measured sip. She knew about the pregnancy. She knew it was a performance, a carefully staged lie designed to cement Celeste's position in the Greystone family. And she knew because she'd spent 10 months learning every secret this family thought was buried. But tonight was not the night to reveal any of that. Not yet. The first course arrived, some kind of butternut bisque with truffle oil, served in shallow bowls rimmed with gold. Mira picked up her spoon and ate in silence while conversation swirled around her like she wasn't there. They discussed the company, Greystone Development Group, the family's crown jewel, a luxury real estate empire spanning 3 states. Leonard talked about upcoming deals. Dante made confident declarations about contracts he barely understood. Vivian discussed a renovation budget for one of their commercial properties as though she were discussing a vacation itinerary. Nobody asked Mira what she thought. Nobody even looked in her direction. She was furniture, background noise, a woman who existed only to be tolerated until she could be removed. But Mira was listening. She was absorbing every word, every number, every careless detail they let slip at this table because they didn't think she was smart enough to understand any of it. They were wrong about that. They were wrong about everything. Then Dante turned his attention to her, and the warmth drained from his expression like water from a cracked vessel. "You're late." "I'm sorry. The traffic was—" "You're always sorry." He cut her off with a wave of his hand. "And there's always traffic. Sit down. Oh wait, you are sitting. Try not to embarrass me tonight. Can you do that much?" A cousin at the far end of the table coughed into his napkin. Vivian's lips pressed into a thin, approving line. Celeste sipped her sparkling water, because of course a pregnant woman wouldn't drink wine, and watched Mira with the patient satisfaction of someone who already knew how the evening would end. But that dinner was only getting started, because what Dante said next would be the cruelest thing anyone had ever said to her, and the last mistake he'd ever make. Dante pushed his bowl aside and leaned back in his chair, loosening his tie with one hand. He rolled his neck, took a long sip of wine, and set the glass down with a deliberate clink. His eyes found Mira, and something ugly flickered behind them. Something rehearsed. "I've been thinking, Mira." The table went quiet. Silverware stopped clinking. Conversations died mid-sentence. Even the candle flames seemed to hold still. About us, about this marriage. He paused, letting the words settle like stones dropped into still water. "And I've come to a decision." Mira's heartbeat accelerated, but her face didn't change. She set her spoon down gently, pressing her hands together beneath the table to stop the shaking. "Dante, maybe we should discuss this privately." "Why?" He spread his hands wide, gesturing to the table full of his family, his mistress, his audience. "Everyone here already knows what I'm going to say. They've known for months. You're the only one who's been pretending this was still something worth saving." Vivian nodded slowly, as if her son had spoken profound truth. Leonard took a measured sip of wine without looking up, detached, unbothered, already past it. Celeste lowered her eyes in a performance of modesty so perfect it could have won an award on any stage in the world. Dante stood up, and the room seemed to shrink around him. He buttoned his jacket, a practiced gesture, something he'd probably rehearsed in a mirror, and walked around the table toward Mira. Each footstep was deliberate, heavy on the marble floor. He stopped right beside her chair, close enough that she could smell his cologne, close enough that his shadow fell across her plate. He looked down at her, not at her, through her, like she was already gone. "You came from nothing, Mira, a nobody from a nowhere town with a grandmother who sold tamales from a kitchen window. I married you because I thought you had potential. I thought I could shape you into something worthy of this family." His lip curled into something that wanted to be a smile but was closer to a sneer. "I was wrong." The words landed like physical blows, each one precise, each one aimed at the softest parts of who she was. A cousin shifted uncomfortably at the end of the table but said nothing. Nobody said anything. Nobody defended her. Not one single person in that room opened their mouth to say, "That's enough." Dante reached inside his jacket and pulled out a folded packet of papers. He didn't hand them to her. He threw them. They landed on her plate, scattering drops of bisque across the white tablecloth like tiny wounds. "Divorce papers. Sign them. Take whatever scraps we offer and disappear." The room held its breath. Mira stared at the papers. Bold black lettering across the top, petition for dissolution of marriage. Her name printed beneath it, next to Dante's signature already scrawled in confident ink. He'd signed before he even asked her. He'd decided before he even told her. This wasn't a conversation. It was a sentencing. Celeste's hand drifted to her stomach, rubbing gentle circles over the lie she carried so convincingly. Vivian's expression shifted to something resembling satisfaction. Quiet, complete, like a door she'd been trying to close for years had finally shut. Leonard didn't even look up. He just swirled his wine. Dante leaned in closer. His voice dropped low, just loud enough for Mira, and just loud enough for everyone else to hear. "You should be grateful I kept you this long. A woman like you, poor, plain, and worthless, where else would you go?" Something fractured inside Mira's chest. Not her spirit, not her resolve. Something else, a wall she'd built between her patience and her power. A wall she'd been dismantling brick by brick for 10 months, waiting for this exact moment. Not to react, but to remember. She wanted to scream. She wanted to throw her glass across the table and watch it shatter against the wall behind his smug, self-satisfied face. She wanted to stand up and tell him everything. Every share she owned, every document she'd signed, every lie she'd uncovered. She wanted to destroy him right here, right now, in front of every person who'd ever looked at her like she was nothing. But she didn't. Not yet. Her grandmother's voice rose from deep within her memory. Warm, steady, unshakable, like candlelight in a stone house during a hurricane. Let the storm pass through you, mija. Don't become it. Let it pass through and then stand in the clearing. Mira pressed her nails into her palms. She breathed. She kept her face still. She looked at every person at that table, their smirks, their satisfaction, their absolute certainty that they had won. Every person at that table thought they were watching a woman fall apart. They were wrong. They were watching a woman decide. Mira stood up. Slowly. The chair scraped softly against the marble floor, and the sound cut through the silence like a blade. She didn't rush. She didn't tremble. She smoothed the front of her dress with both hands and looked directly at Dante. No tears, no begging, no shaking voice. She touched the gold bracelet on her wrist, Rose's bracelet, and turned it slowly, feeling the engraved word on the inside press against her skin. Paciencia. Thank you, Dante, she said. Her voice was quiet, but it carried to every corner of that silent room. Calm, steady, and underneath it, something cold, something no one at that table had ever heard from her before. Thank you for finally showing me, in front of witnesses, exactly who you are. Dante blinked. His confident expression flickered, just for a second, like a light caught in a draft. What? Mira didn't repeat herself. She didn't explain. She picked up the divorce papers from her soup-stained plate, folded them neatly, and slipped them into her purse. Then she turned and walked toward the door. Each step echoed in the frozen room. She could feel their eyes on her back, confused, amused, certain she was retreating in defeat. She didn't look at any of them. She didn't owe them another second of her attention. At the threshold she paused. She didn't turn around. She spoke to the open doorway in front of her, but her voice reached every ear behind her. You'll hear from me soon enough. Then she left. The door closed softly behind her. Not a slam, not a statement. Just a quiet final sound, like the last page of a chapter being turned. Behind her, the laughter erupted immediately. Celeste's voice carried through the heavy wood. Well, that was easier than I expected. Dante grinned and poured himself another glass. Leonard muttered something about, finally. Vivian exhaled like a weight had been lifted from her shoulders. They thought it was over. They thought they'd won. They thought the quiet wife had finally done what quiet wives do, disappeared. Outside, Mira stood on the stone steps of the Greystone estate, breathing in the cool night air. Her hands were shaking now, but it wasn't fear. It wasn't sadness. It was something else. Something sharper, something that had been building inside her for 10 months, compressed and contained, waiting. She looked up at the sky. Stars scattered across the darkness like promises she'd made to herself and never broken. She touched the bracelet one more time, felt the word against her skin. Paciencia, she whispered. Just a little more patience. Inside that house, they were laughing. Outside, Mira was planning. And when the storm finally hit, they wouldn't see it coming. Would you stay silent if someone humiliated you like that? Or would you strike back immediately? Before you answer, remember, Mira's silence that night wasn't weakness. It was the last calm moment before everything changed. Drop a comment and tell me what you would have done. And if you haven't hit that like button yet, now's the time. Trust me, you're going to want to hear what happens next. She didn't go home that night. She drove through the empty streets, past the city lights that blurred like streaks of paint against the darkness, past the neighborhoods where people live normal lives with normal problems, and pulled into the parking garage of a building downtown that no Greystone had ever entered. 14th floor. A small rented office suite, anonymous, soundproof, invisible. The kind of place where the receptionist didn't ask questions and the walls didn't have ears. Mira had rented it 7 months ago using her maiden name. She paid in cash. She came and went through a side entrance. Nobody knew it existed. Inside, the desk was covered with folders, financial documents, corporate filings, stock transfer agreements, coded account summaries, legal briefs organized with colored tabs and cross-referenced footnotes. 10 months of silent, meticulous work spread out like a battle map before the final assault. Mira sat down and opened the central folder, the one labeled Greystone Development Group. Acquisition summary. It listed every transaction, every shell company she'd created using her maiden name, Valdez, and her grandmother's maiden name, Fuentes. Every share of the Greystone empire she'd purchased through intermediaries, anonymous trusts, and legal constructs that Mr. Whitfield, her attorney, had designed with surgical precision. The total, 68%. She owned 68% of the company Dante believed he was running. She owned the buildings Leonard thought he was selling to faceless investors. She owned the future they hadn't even begun to plan. The irony was almost poetic. Leonard had been desperately selling off shares for months, trying to stop the bleeding, trying to keep the company alive while bad investments and reckless spending ate it from the inside. He sold to what he thought were anonymous investment groups, names he didn't recognize, entities that existed only on paper. He never asked who was behind them. He was too desperate, too proud to investigate. He just took the money and signed the documents. Every signature was legal, witnessed, notarized, filed with the state. He sold his empire to the woman his family dismissed as worthless, and he never even knew it. And Dante, who walked through that office every day like he owned the world, had been working for Mira for months. Every meeting he attended, every decision he made, every contract he signed as CEO, it all rolled up to her. He was employed by his wife, and he had absolutely no idea. Her phone buzzed. A text from Mr. Whitfield, final transfer recorded. Ownership confirmed. Ready when you are. Mira stared at the message. Her hands were steady now. The shaking was gone, replaced by something colder, harder, more deliberate. She typed back, schedule the shareholders' meeting. 1 week from today. The reply was immediate. Done. Have you ever carried a secret so powerful it could change everything if you said it out loud? That's what Mira had been carrying for 10 months. And in 7 days she would finally set it down, right in the middle of a boardroom table, and watch the people who heard her realize what they'd lost. She'd been invisible for 10 months. In 7 days, the whole world would see her, and when they did, nothing would ever be the same. But to understand why Mira had the strength to do what she did, to understand the fire that burned quietly inside her, you have to understand where it came from. You have to understand Rosa. Mira was raised by her grandmother, Rosa Fuentes. Her parents left when she was 4, her father first, then her mother 6 months later, chasing a life that didn't include a child. Rosa stepped in without hesitation, without complaint, without a single word of self-pity. She worked 2 jobs, mornings at a laundromat folding other people's clothes, evenings at a small restaurant washing dishes until her hands cracked and bled. She never talked about being poor. She never talked about being tired. She just kept going, quiet, steady, unbreakable. And she raised Mira to do the same. Rosa kept a small leather-bound notebook filled with recipes, household accounts, and scattered observations written in her looping Spanish script. Between a recipe for mole negro and a grocery list from 2011, she'd written something that Mira memorized as a teenager and never forgot. They will look past you because you are quiet. Good. Quiet women build empires while loud men build excuses. On Mira's 18th birthday, Rosa gave her the gold bracelet, thin, simple, with one word engraved on the inside, paciencia. You will face people who try to make you small, Rosa told her, clasping the bracelet around Mira's wrist with fingers that were rough and warm. This word will remind you that smallness is a choice, and it's never yours to make. Rosa also left something else, something Mira didn't discover until after the funeral. A trust fund. Money saved over decades from those 2 jobs, invested wisely and never touched. It wasn't millions, but it was enough. Enough to start, enough to build. Mira grew that money through careful, patient investment, the same way Rosa grew tomatoes on the windowsill of their apartment, slowly, attentively, with faith that something small could become something nourishing. By the time Mira saw the Greystone Company struggling, she had the resources to act, and the wisdom to do it invisibly. Rosa left one more thing, a sealed envelope given to her lawyer with specific instructions. Give this to Mira when her heart is no longer safe. Mira had picked up the envelope the day after the boardroom dinner, but she hadn't opened it. Not yet. She wasn't ready. Her grandmother had survived worse than Dante Greystone. She'd survived abandonment, poverty, exhaustion, and a world that told her she didn't matter. And she'd done it all while raising a granddaughter who would one day own a company worth hundreds of millions of dollars. Rosa taught Mira that patience wasn't passive. It was power stored in silence, compressed and refined, waiting for the right moment to be released. And that moment was almost here. The days that followed the dinner moved with the strange elastic quality of time before a storm. Mira met with Mr. Whitfield every morning at the downtown office, refining the presentation, organizing the evidence, ensuring that every claim was documented and every lie was cataloged. Whitfield slid the final acquisition papers across the conference table. Sign here, here, and here. Once you do, your ownership is official and irrevocable. You control the company. Mira picked up the pen. Her hands didn't shake. She signed each page carefully, watching the ink dry on her new identity. Not Mira Greystone, the dismissed wife. Mira Valdez Fuentes, the hidden corporate powerhouse. It's done, Whitfield said, collecting the papers. You now control the company Dante thinks belongs to his father, legally, completely. Next came the evidence binder. Whitfield opened a thick, organized folder and walked Mira through each section. Corporate filings proving her ownership. Financial reports showing quarterly losses under Dante's oversight. Contracts approved without review. Unqualified friends hired into key positions. Company funds spent on personal luxuries. Emails from dissatisfied clients complaining about unprofessionalism. And then the section that made Mira's jaw tighten. Celeste Moreau, a friend of Mira's, Lena, had seen Celeste at a bar 3 weeks earlier, drinking cocktails, smoking cigarettes, dancing in a tight dress with her arms raised overhead, her stomach flat, her body moving without a care in the world. Lena took photos, time-stamped, geotagged, and sent them to Mira that night. Combined with the private investigator's findings, no doctor visits, no prenatal records, no ultrasounds, credit card receipts for alcohol and cigarettes during every month of the supposed pregnancy, the case against Celeste was devastating. And there were text messages. Celeste to a friend, he actually believes it. Men are so stupid. Another one. Just a few more weeks and I'll be set for life. Celeste Moreau had never been pregnant. The entire thing was a lie, a strategic fabrication designed to accelerate Dante's divorce from Mira and install Celeste as the next Mrs. Greystone. Mira laid the photos side by side with Celeste's text messages about morning sickness and baby names. The contrast was damning. On one side, a woman claiming to be nurturing new life. On the other, a woman living like she had no responsibilities at all. Whitfield tapped the binder. This doesn't just prove she lied, it proves she's a manipulator, someone who will say anything to get what she wants. When this comes out, she won't be able to hide. Mira's phone buzzed during one of their sessions. Dante's name on the screen. She answered, keeping her voice neutral. Emma, sign the papers. Stop dragging this out. I'll sign when I'm ready, Dante. Not before. Not ready. His voice rose with frustration. What is there to be ready for? This marriage is over. Everyone knows it. Just sign and move on with your life. Maybe you never really knew me, Dante, Mira said quietly. Maybe you only ever saw what you wanted to see. She hung up before he could respond. Her hand tightened around the phone for a moment. Then she slipped it into her pocket and turned back to the evidence binder. Everything was in place. Every document organized. Every lie documented. Every transaction verified. All that was left was the moment itself. The moment she'd walk into that boardroom and watch their world collapse. We're about to get to the moment everything changes. The scene where Mira walks into that boardroom and reveals who she really is. But before we do, if this story is hitting different for you right now, smash that like button and share this with someone who needs to hear it. Sometimes the quietest person in the room is the most dangerous. Now, let's see what happens when the storm finally breaks. 5 days before the shareholders' meeting, Mira received an invitation she wasn't expecting. Another family dinner at the Greystone estate. Dante wanted to finalize things. His text was short. Dinner tonight. Be there at 7. We need to finish this. Mira almost didn't go. But then she realized this was an opportunity. One last chance to see them all in their natural habitat. One last chance to let them show her exactly who they were before she showed them who she was. She arrived just before 7. Same grand hallway. Same marble floors. Same paintings on the walls that cost more than most people made in a year. But this time, Mira didn't feel small walking through that door. She felt like someone studying a map before crossing enemy territory. The dinner played out exactly as expected. Dante insulted her. Celeste performed the pregnancy. Vivian was cold. Leonard was dismissive. The same cruelty, the same patterns, the same choreography of contempt they'd been rehearsing for years. Dante cornered her with the divorce papers again, pushing them across the table. Sign these. End this. Stop dragging it out. He leaned close. You're being difficult on purpose. This isn't like you." Mira looked at him, really looked at him, and for the first time in months, she didn't feel hurt. She didn't feel small. She felt something else entirely. Clarity. "You invited me here to humiliate me one more time," she said quietly. "One last performance in front of everyone. You're being dramatic." "Am the first." She stood up slowly, every eye locked onto her. "You spent years making me feel worthless, Dante, and tonight you wanted to do it again, so go ahead, say what you came here to say." Dante puffed up, his confidence radiating like heat from a furnace. "Fine, you want the truth? You're not good enough for me, Mira. You never were. You came from nothing, you have nothing, and you are nothing." Mira nodded slowly, as though considering his words. Then she did something that made the entire table go still. She quoted him, word for word, calmly, precisely. "Poor, plain, and worthless. Those were your exact words at the last dinner, Dante. You threw these papers in my face." She gestured to the documents on the table. "You should be grateful anyone married you," and everyone here laughed. She looked around the room, meeting every pair of eyes. Every single one of you laughed. The silence was absolute. Even Celeste stopped touching her stomach. Mira walked toward the door, and at the threshold she paused. She didn't turn around. Her voice carried clearly over her shoulder. "By the way, Dante, that company your father's been so desperate to save, the one you think you're running." A pause, just long enough for the words to settle. "You should ask him who really owns it. You might be surprised." She walked out. The door closed softly behind her. Inside, panic detonated. Dante turned to his father. "What is she talking about? Who owns the company?" Leonard's face went chalk white. Celeste stood up, shrill and defensive. "She's bluffing. She's nobody." But Leonard was already reaching for his phone with shaking hands. Outside, Mira stood on the front steps, breathing cool night air, her hands trembling with adrenaline. She felt alive. She felt powerful. She felt like the storm her grandmother always told her she could be. She planted the seed and walked away. In 2 days it would grow into something that would swallow them whole. The morning of the shareholders' meeting, Mira dressed carefully. Charcoal blazer over a white blouse, simple gold earrings, Rose's bracelet. She looked at herself in the mirror for a long time, not searching for confidence, but acknowledging the woman who had survived long enough to reach this moment. She arrived at Greystone Development headquarters 40 minutes early. Mr. Whitfield was already in the conference room, a vast glass-walled space on the top floor with a panoramic view of the skyline. Projector connected. Evidence binders arranged at strategic points around the table. "They'll arrive expecting a routine quarterly update," Whitfield said. "Leonard has no idea you called this meeting." Mira sat at the head of the table, the seat that had always belonged to Leonard Greystone, and folded her hands. "Good. Let them walk in comfortable." They came one by one. Board members first, 5 men and 2 women, loyal to the Greystone name but visibly uneasy with its declining fortunes. Then Leonard, walking with the rigid authority of a man who refused to acknowledge his empire was crumbling. Then Dante, wearing a suit that cost more than most people's monthly rent, Celeste on his arm like a trophy, both dressed for celebration. Dante froze when he saw Mira at the head of the table. "What the hell is she doing here?" "That's what I'd like to know," Leonard snapped. Mr. Whitfield stepped forward. "Mrs. Valdez is the majority shareholder of Greystone Development Group. She owns 68% of this company. She called this meeting." The silence that followed was so complete you could hear the building breathe. Leonard's face drained of color. "That's impossible." Mira pressed a button on the laptop. The projector illuminated the wall behind her. A corporate ownership chart, shell companies, trusts, acquisition dates, legal filings, all flowing upward into a single name. Mira Valdez Fuentes. "Over the past 10 months, Mira began, her voice steady and unhurried, "I have acquired controlling interest in this company through a series of legal transactions. Every share was purchased at fair market value. Every contract was witnessed, notarized, and filed with the state." She looked at Dante. "Your father signed every one of them." She clicked to the next slide. Transaction records, Leonard's signature on each page, clear as daylight. "You were selling to save the company," Mira said, addressing Leonard directly. "And you never asked who was buying. You were too desperate, too proud to investigate. You just took the money and hoped for the best." Leonard gripped the edge of the table. His mouth opened. Closed. Opened again. Nothing came out. Dante's face turned a dangerous shade of red. This is fraud. You manipulated him. I saved him. The steel in Mira's voice made the room flinch. This company was drowning. Debt, mismanagement, reckless spending. She clicked again. Financial reports showing quarterly losses under Dante's oversight. Emails from dissatisfied clients. Expense reports revealing company funds used for personal trips, luxury purchases, entertainment. Every decision you made cost this company money, Dante. Every contract you approved without reading. Every unqualified friend you hired into positions they couldn't handle. A board member, an older woman named Mrs. Alvarado, shook her head. We suspected the finances were being mishandled. We just didn't have proof. Now you do, Mira said. She paused, letting the weight settle. Then she clicked one final time. Celeste's face appeared on the screen. Photos from nightclubs, cocktails in hand, cigarettes between fingers, dancing in tight dresses, her stomach flat. Alongside them, text messages. He actually believes it. Men are so stupid. Just a few more weeks and I'll be set for life. Celeste shot to her feet. Where did you get those? Those are private. Those are proof that you were never pregnant, Mira said. You fabricated the pregnancy to manipulate Dante into divorcing me faster. No doctor visits, no prenatal care, no ultrasounds, just lies. Celeste grabbed her purse and ran for the door. The sound of her heels echoed down the hallway, frantic, panicked, and then she was gone, leaving nothing behind but the wreckage of her carefully constructed fiction. Dante stood frozen. The arrogance had been stripped from his face like paint from a wall in a hurricane. He looked at his father. His father wouldn't meet his eyes. Mira stood, both palms flat on the table, voice like iron wrapped in velvet. As of this morning, I am the acting CEO of Greystone Development Group. Dante, you are terminated. Leonard, you are removed from the board. These decisions are effective immediately. She looked at the remaining board members. For those of you who wish to stay and help me rebuild this company into something worthy of respect, I welcome you. For those who don't, there's the door. Nobody moved toward the door. Mrs. Alvarado spoke first. I'm staying. This company has needed real leadership for a long time. Dante finally found his voice. Small, broken, unrecognizable. Mira, I didn't. But you didn't what? She asked. You didn't think I was capable. You didn't think the woman you called worthless could take everything you thought was yours. She picked up the divorce papers, the same ones he'd thrown on her plate, and set them neatly on the table in front of him. I'll sign these, gladly, but on my terms, not yours. She turned and walked out. The door closed softly behind her. Devastating. That evening, Mira sat in her car in the parking garage beneath the building. Hands on the steering wheel. Engine off. Silence everywhere. The adrenaline had drained completely, and in its absence, she felt hollow. Not sad, not triumphant, just empty. Mr. Whitfield had knocked on her window before she left. Are you okay? I don't know, she admitted. I thought I'd feel different, happier, something. You've been running on strategy and survival for 10 months. Now that it's done, your body's crashing. Go home, rest. She drove through the city streets without paying attention to where she was going. Her phone buzzed relentlessly. Texts, emails, calls from board members, investors, contacts who'd suddenly remembered she existed. She ignored most of them. A text from Dante. We need to talk. Please. She deleted it. A text from Leonard. You've destroyed my family. I hope you're proud. She almost laughed. Destroyed his family. They destroyed themselves. She just held up the mirror. Her friend Lena came over that night with takeout and a bottle of wine. They sat on the couch eating in comfortable silence until Lena asked the question Mira had been avoiding. Are you happy? Mira set down her fork. I'm satisfied. I'm relieved, but happy? I don't know what that feels like anymore. Lena squeezed her hand. You've been through hell. It's okay to not be happy right away. Just don't forget to feel something other than anger and determination. Late that night, the phone rang. Unknown number. Mira almost didn't answer. Hello? Mira. Dante's voice was different. Quieter, stripped bare. Please don't hang up. She walked to the window. You have 3 minutes. I messed up. I know that. I was arrogant. I was cruel. I took you for granted, and I hate myself for it. His voice cracked. Is there any way we can fix this? Mira closed her eyes. Something twisted in her chest. Not love, not forgiveness, but grief for the version of herself who once believed in him. Some things can't be fixed, Dante. Some things are just broken forever. Silence. Then, barely a whisper, "I understand." He hung up. Mira stood by the window for a long time, the phone still in her hand. She wasn't sad for Dante. She was sad for the woman who once loved him, the woman who believed they'd build a life together. That woman was gone now, replaced by someone harder, sharper, stronger. She didn't know if that was better or worse. She just knew it was necessary. The next morning, Mira walked into the CEO's office, her office. Massive desk, leather chair, panoramic view of the city stretching to the horizon. She draped Rosa's bracelet over the corner of her desk lamp and sat down. The entire staff gathered in the main conference room to meet their new CEO. Mira stood at the front and looked at the faces staring back at her, curious, skeptical, hopeful. "I know most of you don't know me, and the ones who do probably only know me as Dante's wife, but that's not who I am anymore." She paused. "I'm Mira Valdez, and I'm here to rebuild this company into something we can all be proud of. We're going to focus on 3 things: quality, integrity, and respect. If you're willing to work hard and help me rebuild, I want you here. If not, there's the door. No hard feelings." The room was silent for a long moment. Then one person started clapping. Then another. Then the entire room erupted in applause. Mira felt something warm spread through her chest. Not pride, not satisfaction. Relief. Relief that maybe she could turn this disaster into something good. Leonard requested a private meeting the next day. He walked into her office with threats disguised as negotiations. Give him a board seat, give Dante a smaller role, let them salvage something. Mira slid a stack of signed contracts across the desk. "Your lawyers will tell you the same thing I'm telling you. You have no case, Leonard. You signed everything willingly. It's done." "You'll regret this," he said. "The only thing I regret," Mira said quietly, "is not doing it sooner." He stormed out. She never saw him again. 6 months later, the company had been transformed. Revenue was up 40%. Client satisfaction scores were the highest they'd been in 5 years. The staff trusted her. The board respected her. Everything she fought for was finally real. Mira opened the bottom drawer of her desk and pulled out the sealed envelope, the one Rosa had left with her lawyer years ago, with instructions to give it to Mira when her heart is no longer safe. She broke the seal with careful fingers and unfolded the letter inside. Rosa's handwriting, shaky from her final weeks, but every word clear. "My dearest Mira, if you're reading this, it means you faced something that hurt you deeply, something that made you question who you are and what you're worth. I wish I could be there to tell you this in person, but since I can't, I'm writing it down so you'll always have it. You are not defined by how people treat you. You are defined by how you respond. I raised you to be kind, but kindness doesn't mean weakness. I raised you to be patient, but patience doesn't mean accepting abuse. I raised you to be gentle, but gentleness doesn't mean you can't be strong. Whatever you did to protect yourself, whatever choices you made to survive, I'm proud of you. Not because you fought back, but because you refused to stay small. Use what I left you wisely, not for revenge, but for building something beautiful, something that honors the woman you've become. I love you, Mira, always." "Rosa." Mira pressed her hands to her face and cried. Quiet, steady tears that washed away months of tension she hadn't known she was carrying. She'd been holding so much guilt, wondering if she'd gone too far, wondering if Rosa would have been disappointed. But Rosa understood. She'd always understood. "Thank you, Abuela," Mira whispered. "For everything." She folded the letter carefully and placed it back in the drawer next to the notebook and the bracelet. Then she stood and walked to the window, feeling lighter than she had in years. The city stretched out before her, vast, alive, full of possibility. Somewhere out there, Dante was trying to rebuild a life stripped of the privileges he'd never earned. Leonard was still bitter, still convinced he'd been wronged. Celeste had vanished entirely, her lies chasing her like shadows she could never outrun. But Mira wasn't thinking about them anymore. She was thinking about tomorrow, about the company she was building, about the life she was creating, a life where she didn't have to apologize for taking up space, a life where her voice mattered, a life where she was finally truly free. She didn't know what the future held, but she knew one thing with absolute certainty. She would never let anyone make her feel worthless again. She would never apologize for being strong, and she would never forget the woman her grandmother raised her to be. patient but not passive, kind but not foolish, gentle but not weak. Mira Valdez was no longer the quiet, dismissed wife. She was a CEO, a leader, a woman who turned humiliation into power and pain into purpose. And that was a legacy worth building. Would you forgive the people who broke you? Or would you leave them behind and build something they could never touch? Mira chose to build, and in doing so, she became unstoppable. If this story moved you, hit that like button and share it with someone who needs to hear this today. Sometimes the person everyone underestimates is the one who changes everything. Drop a comment below telling me which part of this story hit you the hardest. I read every single one. And if you haven't subscribed yet, what are you waiting for? Join the Love Chronicles family. I'll see you in the next one.